Have you ever felt like your future is right there, but never quite arrives? Like no matter how many affirmations you whisper, or how vivid your vision board becomes, life doesn't shift? This isn't failure. It's a deeper invitation. In this calm, immersive exploration, you'll discover why your reality hasn't changed yet, and how everything begins to move the moment you stop chasing and start harmonizing. This story isn't about mindset hacks or spiritual cliches. It's about the quiet science of energy, frequency, and the emotional resonance that rewrites your life from the inside out. Take a deep breath, soften your mind, let go of needing to fix right now, wherever you are on your bed, on a walk, under moonlight, or beneath soft morning sheets. Check in. What time is it? What does the air feel like on your skin? This is your moment. You're not here by accident. Something within you aligned with this story. Close your eyes and imagine tuning your body like an instrument, not forcing it, but listening. Not commanding change, but becoming the kind of presence that makes change inevitable. This isn't about creating your future. It's about remembering that your body already knows how to receive it. And when it does, the world around you begins to echo that shift. There's a moment you've probably known, but couldn't name a quiet ache beneath all your effort. A sense that despite everything you've tried, reality still hasn't caught up with your vision. It's not that your dreams are absent. It's that they hover, just slightly beyond reach, like breath on glass visible, but untouchable. You affirm, you visualize. You set intentions with hope stitched into every syllable. But when you open your eyes, the room is the same. The future you long for stays tethered to someday. And that gap between what you feel is possible and what's here now becomes its own kind of grief. Why hasn't it changed yet? It's easy to think the universe hasn't heard you, that maybe your faith wasn't strong enough, or your mindset still cracked at the edges. But what if the delay isn't rejection? What if it's resonance still forming? You've been taught that thoughts create, and in part, they do. But the full equation includes something deeper, something felt, not spoken. A field doesn't just respond to what you want. It responds to who you're being right now. Your vibration, not your vocabulary. Your breath, not your bullet journal. Your body has been whispering signals that your mouth never mentions. You're not failing. You're just emitting multiple frequencies. One voice says yes, but another quieter, older still flinches, still waits, still doubts. This is the fracture between dreaming and receiving. The fracture that comes not from lack of clarity, but from lack of coherence. Coherence isn't perfection. It's alignment. When your body, heart, and mind all speak the same language, without contradiction, the field recognizes it like a tuning fork. Until then, your reality remains conceptual. It exists, but it hasn't landed. Not because it can't, but because it doesn't yet recognize where to land. Think of your body not as something you move through the world, but as an antenna broadcasting constantly. And every cell, every breath, every subtle emotion is a signal. The mind may declare, "I'm ready," but if your body is still clenched in memories of lack or fear, the message becomes static. The field isn't ignoring you. It's receiving scrambled instructions. To shift your reality, you don't have to shout louder. You simply have to become clearer. You don't need more effort. You need more resonance. This is the tender place, where the old paradigm breaks apart. Because for so long, we've been conditioned to perform alignment, to mimic confidence, rehearse abundance, act as if. But the field doesn't respond to acting. It responds to embodiment. And embodiment begins when the future you crave no longer feels separate. When it no longer feels like a possibility, but a presence. Not a destination, but a vibration. That shift is subtle, invisible, and yet it reorganizes everything. You've probably already tasted it, those brief flashes when time bends. When your heart softens and something inside says, "This feels like home." Moments when you weren't pushing, but allowing. When something old relaxed. When you breathed differently, even for a moment. Those were coherence. Those were portals. And they didn't open because you figured something out. They opened because you dropped into a frequency that matched what you were asking for. Not through control. Through surrender. Not the surrender of giving up. The surrender of tuning in. That's the difference. That's the key. Because trying harder often stiffens the very channels that were meant to flow. You tighten. You overfocus. You brace. And in doing so, you push away the very reality that requires your openness to arrive. You don't manifest with tension. You manifest with trust. And trust is a frequency, not a concept. It lives in the belly, in the chest, in the rhythm of breath, not in logic. Here's something your nervous system knows. Even when your mind forgets, you are always manifesting. Even now, even in confusion, even in stillness. The field is always listening, always responding to the signal you emit through your state, not your story. Your story might say, "I'm abundant," but your breath might still be shallow with worry. Your posture still curled in protection. Your sleep still interrupted by scarcity looping in the background. The field mirrors your dominant vibration, not your spoken desires. That's not a punishment. That's a profound invitation. Because it means you don't have to convince the universe to give you what you want. You only have to become a vibrational match to it. Not by acting, but by feeling. By letting your body become the home of what your mind used to chase. That's where the magic lives, in embodiment, not strategy. In coherence, not repetition. And coherence is a practice, not a performance. This is where it turns. Where everything you thought was missing is actually already surrounding you, just tuned to a slightly different frequency. And your access to it isn't through more doing. It's through deeper being, through softening your resistance, through breathing like a version of you who already lives there, through walking, speaking, and choosing from the place where you no longer need to earn what you've already become. Let's pause here, not intellectually, but energetically. What if nothing needs to be added? What if something only needs to be allowed? What if the reason your reality hasn't changed is not because it's far away, but because it's been waiting for you to stop chasing it long enough to feel it within? Because the field doesn't respond to urgency. It responds to clarity, to calm, to presence. You don't have to become someone else. You only have to remember who you were before you believed you weren't enough. Before the noise, before the scripts, before the delays turned into self-doubt. Underneath all that noise is a signal, your original frequency. And it's still humming, waiting for you to hear it again. When you do, reality begins to shift, not dramatically, but rhythmically. Like a tide that slowly turns because the moon moved, not because the ocean tried harder. You are not broken. You are just between songs, between chapters, between broadcasts. And this moment, the stillness, the yearning, the discomfort is not failure. It's tuning. Something inside you is recalibrating. And that recalibration cannot be rushed. It cannot be forced. It can only be received through breath, through trust, through presence. So rest here. Not as an act of delay, but as an act of power. Because rest is not retreat. It's resonance. The universe doesn't reward noise. It responds to clarity. And clarity arrives when you become honest enough to stop pretending you're okay and soft enough to admit you're ready to be. That honesty is coherence. That softness is alignment. And so, perhaps the question is no longer, why hasn't my reality changed? Perhaps the question is, what part of me is still waiting for permission to receive it? Because the moment You feel safe enough, grounded enough, present enough to receive what you've been chasing. That's the moment the chase ends. Not with a bang, but with a breath. Let's go deeper now, not into thought, but into sensation. Into the quiet space your mind often skips over in its hurry to understand. Because the transformation you long for doesn't live in explanation. It lives in experience, in the felt sense, in the resonance of a body no longer resisting itself. The future doesn't arrive when you finally think hard enough. It arrives when you feel safe enough to let it land. Your nervous system must recognize the reality you desire as familiar, not foreign. Until then, it will guard you from the very life you say you want. This is why effort often leads to exhaustion, not arrival. Because when you push toward a vision that your body doesn't trust, the energy becomes fragmented. The vision board shines with hope, but the breath trembles beneath it. You say the words, but your cells remember disappointment. You visualize the outcome, but tension lingers in your shoulders like an old story refusing to dissolve. The field doesn't punish you for this mismatch. It simply reflects it, like a mirror waiting for the light to steady before showing the image clearly. The heart, though, knows how to stabilize that light. Not the poetic heart, but the literal electromagnetic. One, the organ that emits a field thousands of times stronger than your brain. This heart carries its own neurons, its own rhythms, its own way of remembering. And when you breathe into it, not just physically, but emotionally, you begin to tune your entire system to a new frequency. Gratitude isn't just a nice idea. It's an energetic coherence generator. Appreciation isn't passive. It's magnetic. It rearranges your biology in ways your intellect cannot. But it must be real. Not rehearsed, not forced. The field cannot be tricked. It responds only to what's true. So the practice isn't pretending to feel joy. The practice is creating enough stillness for joy to rise naturally, sometimes in the form of relief, sometimes as tears, sometimes as the softest exhale after years of holding your breath. That moment, however subtle, is the frequency shift. And that's when the world begins to reorganize itself around you, not because you commanded it to, but because you stopped canceling your signal with inner noise. Think of your thoughts as a spark, electrical, directional, precise. They're useful. They're necessary. But without emotional charge, they're like arrows without mass. They pierce the field, but don't move it. Emotion adds the weight. Emotion adds the momentum. And not just any emotion, but consistent, embodied feeling. Not excitement once a week, but coherence in daily rhythm. That's the signal the field mirrors. That's the difference between wishing and receiving, between hunger and harmony, is why so many people remain stuck in cycles that feel like effort without evolution. They're thinking the right thoughts, but feeling the wrong signals. They speak abundance while living in the somatic echo of scarcity. They script love while flinching from trust. And the field, always honest, always exact, reflects the deeper truth. This isn't cruelty. This is precision. The universe isn't judging you. It's aligning with you. And alignment doesn't care what you say. It cares what you are. You are not your affirmations. You are your frequency. And your frequency is shaped by the signals you emit through presence, not performance. Performance tries to prove worth. Presence remembers it. One demands, the other invites. One argues with reality. The other becomes the kind of reality that doesn't need argument to exist. That's where power lies, in becoming so vibrationally anchored in what you desire that you no longer ask for it. You embody it. And the field, with perfect coherence, responds. There's something liberating in this, even if it sounds confronting at first. Because it means you're not waiting on the world to change. You're waiting on your signal to clarify. That's all. You don't need to wait for external permission or divine timing or the right affirmation to go viral in your subconscious. You need to tune your instrument, your breath, your posture, your emotions into the frequency that already contains what you seek. And to do that, you must stop looking forward and start feeling inward. This is embodiment. And it begins with the smallest gestures, breathing deeper, sitting softer, noticing where your body curls in on itself and asking gently what memory lives there. Listening without rushing to fix, offering safety to your own cells. When your body begins to feel safe in the presence of possibility, everything changes. The signal becomes stable. The field responds in kind. Not overnight, not in spectacle, but in rhythm. In timing that feels guided, not delayed. Sometimes what we call a block is just a frequency mismatch. Not a failure, but a dissonance. The solution isn't to scream louder into the void. The solution is to hum into harmony. To become so emotionally congruent with the version of you who already has what you seek that the field must mirror it. You're not asking for change. You are change. And change, once embodied, doesn't chase outcomes. It attracts them, not through demand, but through compatibility. This compatibility begins with honesty. You cannot embody a frequency while denying the one you're currently holding. That's bypassing. That's suppression. And suppressed emotions don't disappear. They just become static in your field. The path to coherence includes feeling the incoherence, not judging it, not avoiding it, meeting it, holding it like a trembling animal, not to cage it, but to comfort it, to show your own system, we are safe now. We can open again. That's the recalibration. That's the inner shift the outer world waits for, not as a punishment, but as a prerequisite. Because the life you want has a rhythm, a tone, a flavor, and you must become fluent in it before it can become real. Not intellectually, somatically, emotionally. You must breathe like you already live there. You must speak like it's already familiar. You must move like nothing is missing, even while the mind insists it is. That defiance of lack is not delusion. It's creation. You're not delusional for imagining a different life. You're brave for feeling into it before it arrives. And that feeling, when nurtured daily, not just when convenient, is what builds the bridge between now and next. Every breath becomes a brick. Every choice to relax instead of react becomes a beam. Every moment you choose trust over tension is a thread weaving the new world into place. And the day it arrives will feel less like surprise and more like recognition. Because the truth is, your future is already here. Not in time, but in frequency. And the more you embody it now, the more obvious it becomes. It shows up in synchronicities, in unexpected clarity, in sudden ease where there was once resistance. This isn't magic. This is physics meeting presence. The laws of resonance responding to a signal you finally stopped interrupting. So ask yourself gently, what would it feel like right now to stop preparing for your life and start living as if it's already unfolding? Not because you're faking it, but because you've remembered the truth beneath all the waiting. You are not here to earn your desires. You are here to receive them as reflections of the self you've already become. There is something extraordinary that happens when your inner state becomes still, not stagnant, but stable, like a lake that has finally stopped rippling from every passing breeze. In that stillness, something subtle begins to arrive, not from outside, but from deep within, a recognition, a quiet yes, not the kind you shout, but the kind that settles into your bones. And in that, yes, the field listens differently. It no longer hears your requests as questions. It hears them as statements of being. This is no longer about changing your life. It's about becoming the version of you that life is already designed to meet. You've come far, maybe without realizing it. Each time you softened your breath instead of clenching, Each time you felt your fear without letting it speak louder than your heart. Each time you imagined joy and allowed your nervous system to taste it before it had reason. Those moments rewired you, silently, slowly. You've been shifting, not through force, but through frequency. That's the path no one teaches in school, the path of vibrational truth. And yet, it's the most powerful one there is, because it doesn't require the world to move. It only asks that you stop fighting your own alignment. There's a myth that transformation is loud, that it comes with fireworks or breakthrough moments. But the deepest shifts arrive like dawn barely noticed until everything is brighter. You wake up one day and respond differently. You speak more gently to yourself. You no longer chase what once defined your worth. You breathe more fully in rooms that used to shrink you. That's coherence. It doesn't declare itself. It lives itself. And when it's embodied, the field responds like a tuning fork hearing its match. This is the miracle most people miss, not because it's hidden, but because it's quiet. We're trained to expect life to change dramatically, visually, loudly. But the quantum world works in subtler language. It speaks through patterns, through resonance, through timing that defies logic but honors alignment. When your internal vibration stabilizes, the external shifts are inevitable, but they arrive. Not when you need them to. They arrive when you no longer need to force them. When you've become a compatible signal, a steady tone in a scattered world. There's immense freedom in this, once you allow it. Because it means you don't need to fix every thought or correct every doubt. You simply need to return, over and over, to the place inside you that already feels like home. The body knows the way. It remembers how to feel safety, even if it's been a while. When you stop pushing your body to match your mind, and instead bring your mind down into your body, something unlocks. A rhythm, a reunion. And in that reunion, your future stops being a wish and becomes a welcome. You may begin to notice this shift in strange ways. Not always in what appears, but in what no longer triggers you. In the absence of panic, where panic once lived. In the soft smile that rises for no reason. In the deeper exhale that finds you without effort. These are not small things. These are the landmarks of transformation. They mark the place where you stopped running from the present and began living inside it. Not because everything was fixed, but because you finally remembered. Nothing needed fixing to begin with. Reality doesn't bend because you push. It bends because you've become the kind of presence that makes bending possible. And that presence has a sound, a scent, a rhythm. It's coherence humming through your cells. It's the signal that says, "This is who I am now," without needing to convince. The moment that signal becomes consistent, the universe adjusts. Doors open, paths clear. Not because you chased them, but because you aligned with what was. Already years dot, and so the practice isn't reaching. It's remembering. Not imagining more clearly, but receiving more fully. Each time you pause to breathe like your future self would breathe, you collapse a little more distance between now and then. Each time you embody trust, even in silence, you broadcast a new signal. One that says, "I'm ready not because I've figured it out, but because I've tuned in." That's when life shifts, not because it was waiting, but because you stopped vibrating against it. You are not chasing a life. You are becoming its echo. And in time, echo becomes origin. You're not asking for transformation. You're anchoring it breath by breath, choice by choice. Not through perfection, but through presence, through honesty, through the quiet willingness to feel before form arrives. This is what most never do. They wait for reality to give them permission to feel whole. But wholeness is what births new reality, not what follows it. Let yourself feel that now. Not conceptually, but somatically. What would it feel like to Be the version of you who no longer waits, who no longer negotiates with life for scraps of worthiness. What would it sound like in your thoughts? How would your shoulders rest? What tone would your voice carry? Not just when you speak to others, but when you speak to yourself. That's the frequency, not fantasy. Embodiment. You've already seen glimmers of this. The day you let go and everything got easier. The moment you relaxed and the answer arrived. The time you trusted your timing and realized you'd never been behind. Those weren't accidents. They were coherence. They were previews, invitations. And they will come again more frequently, more fully each time you stop reaching and start remembering that you are already enough, already attuned, already in rhythm with the version of life you thought was somewhere else. Because here's the final truth hiding beneath it all. You were never meant to manifest reality through control. You are meant to become the kind of vessel that naturally births alignment. Not because you said the right words, but because you became the right signal. Not through strategy, but through stillness. Through the kind of emotional honesty that doesn't need fixing, only feeling. This is not bypassing. This is biology harmonized with intention. This is frequency anchored through nervous system safety. This is the collapse of separation between you and what you've been waiting for. And it begins not with action, but with allowance. Not with force, but with familiarity. When your body becomes familiar with joy, with trust, with peace, then those states no longer feel like visitors. They feel like home. And home becomes magnetic. You are not broadcasting alone. Your signal is part of a vast field, a symphony of frequencies woven into nature, into other people, into the very ground beneath your feet. The heart is not just a metaphor, it is the conductor of that signal. When your heart is in harmony, the music around you changes. You attract differently. You speak differently. You walk into rooms and shift the tone without trying. Not because you're performing, but because you're a coherent dot. So breathe into that possibility now. Not as an effort, but as a remembering. You don't need to chase your future. You only need to feel it as if it's already known. And the more often you do, the shorter the distance becomes between dreaming and being, between imagining and living, between who you were told you were and who you actually are beneath it all. You are not late. You are not lost. You are tuning. And when the tone settles into clarity, the rest comes not with noise, but with grace. At some point in your journey, there's a softening. Not because the world finally yields, but because you do not in defeat, but in wisdom. You stop trying to manipulate the timing of your life and start listening for its rhythm. You begin to notice how much effort you once poured into becoming, not realizing that the most magnetic state you could ever reach was simply being. And as you land more fully in that state, something ancient begins to stir. A remembrance not taught but known, not achieved but uncovered. It is here that alignment becomes less of a task and more of a returning dot. You begin to feel the difference between creating from desire and creating from identity. Desire often whispers of lack. It says, I want because I don't yet have. But identity speaks from fullness. It says, I express this because it's who I am. When you create from that space, not from hunger, but from resonance, you shift your relationship with the field. No longer are you asking it to deliver proof. You are offering it a signal so clear, so stabilized, that response becomes automatic. Not as reward, as reflection. And this reflection isn't always immediate, because the universe doesn't operate on human impatience. It operates on coherence. It listens not to urgency, but to stability. It waits for your frequency to settle before it mirrors it back. Like a pond reflecting the sky, only once the ripples calm. And so your job is not to rush the process, but to become still enough for the image to form. Not passive, just precise. There is a difference. One waits in fear, the other listens in faith. This is where surrender changes meaning. It is no longer giving up, it is tuning in. It is no longer abandoning intention. It is honoring readiness. And readiness is not measured by how much you want something. It's measured by how fully your body can hold it without collapsing, without bracing, without going numb. That is the nervous system's language. That is the signal the quantum field understands. And that signal isn't strengthened by striving. It's strengthened by safety dot. So you begin to ask yourself softer questions. Not, how can I get what I want? But can I hold what I say I want with grace, with steadiness, with breath? Not, why hasn't it come yet? But is there still a part of me vibrating with resistance to receiving it? These questions don't seek fault. They seek frequency. And frequency is never wrong. It's just either coherent or incoherent. And coherence can be cultivated, like tuning an instrument, not by force, but by listening. You tune yourself through presence, through ritual, through repetition that isn't mechanical but meaningful. A daily breath of gratitude. A quiet walk where you imagine your future has already arrived, not for the fantasy, but for the familiarity. You let your cells get used to what they used to resist. You rewire your emotional patterns not by denying fear, but by including it, making space for it, letting it dissolve in the light of awareness. This is the quiet work, the invisible alignment that changes everything without announcing itself. Because the field doesn't respond to what's loud, it responds to what's true, and truth is a frequency. It resonates through silence, through groundedness, through that moment when your heart no longer needs to rush and your breath no longer performs. That's when the quantum bridge forms. That's when life rearranges not around your effort, but around your embodiment. You may begin to notice how others respond differently to you, not because you're acting differently, but because your energy has changed. You'll walk into a room and find ease where tension used to follow. You'll speak and be heard more clearly. Opportunities will find you without the chasing. Not because you've become lucky, but because you've become legible to the life you've always imagined. Your signal has stabilized, and in a world of static, clarity is power. This is the science of presence, the physics of now, the biology of coherence. Your thoughts are still valuable, but they are no longer in charge. Your body becomes the guide, the conductor, the oracle, and it speaks not through words, but through the way your chest softens when you're on path, or the way your gut clenches when something's misaligned. These are not symptoms to fix. They are signals to read. You begin to trust your internal technology more than the opinions around you. And when that trust roots deep enough, something profound happens. You no longer seek signs. You become one. Your existence becomes evidence. Your choices become ceremony. Your pace becomes prayer. Not outwardly, not performatively, but in the quiet language of resonance. This is what ancient mystics knew, and modern science is only beginning to map, that when a human becomes coherent, the world cannot help but respond. Not out of favor, but out of law. Like gravity, like magnetism, like breath, you are not separate from that law. You are its embodiment. And when you stop resisting who you are and begin amplifying it, your entire field begins to glow differently. Even your thoughts soften. They stop trying to figure everything out because they sense. A body has remembered something they never knew. You stop thinking your way into safety. You begin breathing your way into alignment. And alignment becomes not a place you visit, but a state you live from. This doesn't mean you never feel doubt again. It means doubt no longer derails you. It visits, but it doesn't unpack. You meet it like a breeze through an open window, acknowledged, felt, but not mistaken for truth. Your truth has grown roots now, deep enough to stay stable even when life sways. And that stability is not rigidity. It's aliveness in stillness, motion in center. Like the eye of the storm, calm not because nothing moves, but because it is the axis of movement itself. You become that axis. And as you do, you realize the change you wanted in your reality was never about things, it was about state. About becoming the version of yourself whose life reflects that frequency naturally, without force, without delay. You look back and see that all the waiting was never about time. It was about calibration. The field wasn't ignoring you. It was syncing with you. It was waiting for your internal music to settle into harmony. Now that it has, or is beginning, you'll feel something shift. Not outside first, but inside. You'll find yourself smiling more often for no reason. Breathing deeper in conversations that used to make you tense. Feeling gratitude before evidence arrives. That's when you know the shift is real. When your reality no longer has to prove itself for you to believe in it. You believe because you are already it, and from that place, reality folds. Time adjusts. Outcomes find their way to your door, not because you knocked louder, but because you became a frequency they could hear. This is the elegance of energetic precision. It doesn't shout. It hums. It doesn't argue. It echoes, and it brings you, not the life you asked for, but the one that was always yours, waiting for your tone to match. This is not manifestation as strategy. This is creation as consequence. The consequence of becoming yourself in your highest resolution. The consequence of emotional alignment so coherent, so unshakably tuned, that reality becomes its mirror. Still, even in this state, you are never finished. Because alignment isn't a final achievement, it's a living practice. A dance, a deepening. Each breath is a new opportunity to remember. Each moment, a chance to return. Not because you strayed, but because presence invites itself again and again. You no longer measure your progress in milestones. You measure it in how gently you respond to your own fluctuations, in how quickly you return to center. That's mastery, not perfection, but return. And so now you walk differently. You speak differently. Not for show, but because something has settled inside you. A knowing, a frequency, a coherence. And it speaks for you, even in silence. It shapes your days. It bends reality. And the more you live from it, the more the world begins to reflect something you've longed to see. Not because it's new, but because you finally stop denying it space. There comes a moment, often so quiet it escapes attention, when you realize that your alignment is no longer just for you. That every breath you take in coherence, every thought anchored in presence, sends ripples through the wider field. You are not an isolated signal bouncing into empty space. You are a living frequency, woven into a collective web, one breath influencing another, one vibration tuning the next. Your coherence becomes contribution. Your embodiment becomes a kind of silent leadership. You begin to notice that just by being grounded, you help others remember how to land. This is not metaphor. It's measurable. The human heart, when coherent, creates electromagnetic patterns that influence those around it. Your presence stable, open, attuned, can calm nervous systems nearby, even without words. Your state becomes a lighthouse, not loud, not demanding, just steady. This is what ancient traditions understood intuitively, that the calmest one in the room sets the rhythm. That healing often begins not through doing, but through being, through showing others, without explanation, what it feels like to come home to yourself. This is the deeper magic you carry, not in your effort, but in your frequency. Not in your answers, but in your embodied questions. Because the most powerful thing you can offer to the field is not knowledge, but resonance. And resonance, once consistent, becomes magnetic. It draws people, opportunities, insights, not because you chase them, but because you've become a field they naturally recognize, not through force, through familiarity, through coherence. And with this realization comes a shift in responsibility, not heavy, but sacred. You begin to understand that every time you choose alignment over reactivity, you anchor clarity into the collective. Every time you rest without guilt, trust without proof, or speak with compassion instead of control, you adjust the signal for everyone. You become a node of balance in a grid, often overwhelmed by chaos. Your stability gives others permission to remember their own. That is quantum activism. That is vibrational leadership. This doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. It doesn't ask that you eliminate fear. It asks that you feel it without becoming it. That you allow emotion to move through you without distorting your tone. Because energy, like water, clears when it's allowed to flow. And the more you let it move, the more refined your frequency becomes. You are not here to hold everything tightly. You are here to hold everything clearly. Clarity, in this sense, isn't certainty. It's coherence. A soft, grounded yes. In the body, a breath that doesn't hesitate. A trust that doesn't demand explanation. This is the soil from which transformation grows. Not the loud transformation of spectacle, but the slow unfurling of something ancient, something native to your being. A self that never needed to be built, only uncovered. You are not becoming new. You are remembering who you were before forgetting. Became survival. And as you remember, you begin to dissolve the illusion of delay. You stop asking, when will it come? And begin living as if it's already here. Not in fantasy, but in frequency. Because every reality already exists as a potential in the field. The ones you align with are the ones that become probable. The ones you embody become inevitable. This is not wishful thinking. This is how the quantum field responds to consistent vibrational presence. So the question becomes softer now. Less about goals, more about ground. Can I root deeper into the version of me that already feels like enough? Can I walk like I trust the timing even before it proves itself? Can I breathe into this moment with the same reverence? I imagine I'll have once everything arrives. These are not small shifts. They are codes. They are frequencies that rewrite the terms of your life, not through external change, but through internal coherence. You are no longer waiting for life to give you permission to exhale. You are exhaling now, and the exhale is what opens the door. The future no longer feels far because your body has made space for it. Not by demanding, but by softening. Not by predicting, but by preparing. This preparation isn't strategy, it's state. And state becomes the script the universe follows. It begins to feel like the edge between you and life is dissolving. Not because you've escaped your humanity, but because you've remembered it fully. Every emotion becomes a doorway. Every challenge a tuning fork. Every encounter a mirror showing you not what's wrong, but what's ready. Ready to be held differently, heard differently, felt with more spaciousness and less urgency. This is how transformation begins, not with answers, but with awareness. Awareness doesn't rush. It doesn't react. It watches. It breathes. And in that pause, that breath, that space between stimulus and response, coherence finds its opening. You become the kind of being who no longer needs proof to trust, because your trust has become its own reward. It vibrates through you like warmth, like gravity, like music that makes everything move just a little more gracefully. And still there is humility here. You realize that coherence is not a crown you wear. It's a practice you return to. Some days you wobble. Some hours you forget. But forgetting doesn't undo what you've built. It simply invites another remembering, another breath, another chance to choose alignment over anxiety. And with each return, the space between forgetting and remembering gets smaller. That is growth. That is mastery. This kind of mastery doesn't need applause. It's felt in quiet rooms, in how you respond to tension with a calm that steadies the air, in how you hold silence like a full sentence, in how your presence nourishes even those who don't understand why they feel safer around you. You are becoming a portal, not to escape reality, but to enter it more honestly, more wholly, more coherently. And this coherence extends beyond the personal. It touches how you move through space, how you relate to the earth beneath you, how you eat, how you rest, how you speak to strangers. It becomes the undercurrent of every interaction, not as performance, but as pulse. You begin to feel that every small act is a vibrational signature, that every choice carries a tone, that your life is less about outcomes now and more about orchestration. How does your energy play with the field? What melody are you composing with your breath? When you live this way, your future no longer feels like a goal to reach. It becomes a frequency to return to, over and over, until the return itself becomes home. This is the quiet revolution, the soft rebellion against rushing, forcing, doubting. A surrender not into nothingness, but into precise alignment with what always was. You no longer strive for coherence. You become a dot, and in becoming it, you realize the true purpose of manifestation was never about things. It was about truth, about refining your frequency to such clarity that the world had no choice but to meet you there. Not because you deserved it or finally said the right words, but because you stopped interfering with the signal you are always meant to send. You become a signal now, not a seeker, not a script, a frequency, unmistakable. And from that frequency, life can finally find you. There's a kind of silence that begins to emerge once you've stopped needing life to validate your journey. It's not the silence of absence, but of integration. A quiet hum beneath your thoughts, steady as a heartbeat, that says, I am no longer trying to arrive. I am remembering that I am already here, that I was always here. And in that realization, the desperation begins to dissolve, the panic around time, the pressure to prove, the endless tension of chasing something that only ever lived within you. It all starts to fade, not as an act of surrender, but as a return to coherence. By now, you've noticed it. That shift in the spaces between your actions, the softening in your choices, the pause before reaction, a widening of presence that makes even ordinary moments feel different, more open, more alive. Your breath moves differently now. Your awareness lingers a little longer. You walk through the world as if listening to a song no one else can hear, and yet everything responds to your rhythm. It's not that circumstances always change instantly. It's that your relationship to them does. And from that recalibrated place, life cannot help but begin to mirror your new signal. This is where manifestation becomes natural, not because you're doing it right, but because you're no longer interrupting the resonance that was always trying to reach you. You've stopped sending mixed signals to the field. Your thoughts, your feelings, your body now more often than not, they move in unison. Not perfectly, not without fluctuation, but rhythmically, like a tide that knows when to rise, when to recede, and when to rest. And that rhythm creates momentum, not the rushed momentum of striving, but the deep gravitational pull of alignment. It's in this coherence that your intuition sharpens, not in dramatic flashes, but in subtle nudges you no longer ignore. You begin to trust the quiet inner voice that whispers before the world gives you permission. You sense the path opening not because it's obvious, but because it feels oddly familiar, even if you've never walked it before. You speak less from strategy now and more from state. And your state, tuned by presence, softened by safety, begins to sculpt your reality more effectively than 1,000 affirmations ever could. The affirmations served a purpose once. They helped you notice what you longed for. But longing is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of return. Of course, you still have preferences, desires, dreams, but they are no longer demands. They are invitations, and you no longer cling to them. You honor them. You breathe with them. You let them evolve. Because in this frequency, you've remembered something sacred. What is meant for you doesn't arrive because you chase it. It arrives because you've become spacious enough to hold it without collapsing. That spaciousness wasn't always there. You had to carve it open, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, sometimes through letting go of what once defined your identity. Not because those stories were wrong, but because they were too small for the signal you're now becoming. And so you grieved. You released. You sat in the tension between who you were and who you're now allowing yourself to be. That space was not empty. It was holy. It was the womb of your next self-thought. And now you're beginning to feel what it means to live inside a body that no longer doubts itself. You feel it in the way your spine aligns when you speak your truth, in the way your chest expands when you allow joy without guilt, in the way your face softens when you realize you don't have to fix anything to feel safe. You are no longer negotiating for peace. You are living from it. Not every moment, not every breath, but often enough to know it's yours now. Not a visitor, a home. And from this home, you begin to dream differently, not out of lack, but out of overflow. Your visions come not as escape, but as expression. You no longer visualize to convince the universe. It's already convinced. You visualize because it feels good to connect with what's unfolding. You set intentions not to control, but to clarify, to tune the dial of your field just a little finer, because you now know that reality isn't created through control. It's conducted through coherence. Even your emotions speak differently to you now. You no longer label them as good or bad. You read them. You listen. You let them move. Like weather, knowing each one brings information. Not always in words, but always in tone. Even sadness becomes a kind of clearing. Even anger, when allowed, becomes a calibration. You are no longer afraid of feeling, because you've seen what happens when you feel fully. The energy moves. The signal clarifies. The body realigns. And from that alignment, the field responds not with judgment, but with symmetry. You've likely noticed that your relationships have begun to shift as well. Some deepened, others fell away. Not out of conflict, but out of frequency. You no longer orbit around patterns of need or survival. You connect through resonance, through mutual clarity, through the gentle magnetism of shared presence. And when something doesn't align anymore, you release it not in anger, but in peace. Because you trust that coherence doesn't cling, it chooses. And when it chooses, it does so without fear. This is the maturity of frequency, the groundedness of embodiment. You are no longer just thinking about who you wish to become. You are living as them, breath by breath. And your life, though still unfolding, now feels more like a reflection than a puzzle. Less like a project, more like a poem. Even the delays feel purposeful now. Even the pauses feel sacred, because everything becomes part of the tuning process. And you've learned not to rush a melody still forming. You carry your coherence now, like a quiet fire. It doesn't flare for attention, but it warms everything you touch. It shows up in your posture, your gaze, your choices. People may not know what changed, but they feel it. They feel your stability, your absence of urgency, your refusal to abandon your center, even in discomfort. And that presence, more than any words, becomes the teaching. This is where you realize the field was never waiting for you to be perfect. It was waiting for you to be congruent, not polished, but real, not flawless, but felt. It was always listening. You just needed to become quiet enough to hear your own signal again. And now that you have, You're discovering that life doesn't need to be chased. It wants to dance with you. But it only joins when your rhythm is steady enough to move. With, you've become steady. Not uncheckable, but resilient. Not rigid, but rooted. And in that rooting, your desires begin to land. Not as fantasies, as frequencies. You meet them not with grasping, but with grace. Not with urgency, but with understanding. They no longer feel separate from you. They feel like extensions of who you are when you're fully tuned. And that tuning, you've learned, isn't a destination, it's a practice. One you've already mastered, simply by remembering that the signal was always yours to send. And now, as you breathe into this final moment, notice what's different, not outside you, but within. The chasing has quieted. The tension has softened. You're no longer searching for the signal. You are the signal. And even if life hasn't rearranged itself visibly yet, something foundational has already shifted. You trust the rhythm. You trust yourself. You're not waiting anymore. You're living gently, inside the frequency of what once felt far away. And that frequency stabilized in your breath, in your stillness, in your smallest choices has become magnetic. You are no longer asking the field to prove anything. You're simply inviting it to reflect what's already true. So stay here a little longer. Let the silence complete the work. Let your coherence carry forward, soft and unseen, reshaping everything it touches. Subscribe to our channel so we can meet again next time. Other stories are also waiting for you, each one tuned to help you remember who you already are.